Okay, I think we're live now.
Yes.
I'm still new to this.
It's
So
okay.
whenever you guys have trouble with tech, you don't have to feel bad anymore. We all have
We
those
are
issues.
live.
Yeah. So, do you want to give that answer again to the question? I'll rephrase it for the audience. Um, when did you start drawing?
Yeah. So, like most kids, as soon as you can hold a pencil and stuff, 2 years old, 3 years old, whatever it was, I would, color, draw. I mean, I don't have memories of it. I just know I did from my parents. And unlike most kids who, as they get older, whether it's 4 or 5, whatever, once they can do other things, they move on and they don't really look back like, oh, but I enjoyed doing that. Whereas artists and stuff, we just have to keep going. It's like,
Yes.
yeah, I know I could do that, but I just want to keep doing this.
Hmm.
And I mean, that's basically what it was. I can remember, in elementary school, drawing all the time, teachers even, stop it, pay attention, that type of stuff. And I just always enjoyed it, and I think it's something that, for me at least, I kind of always give an example of, if we go on vacation, my family and I, if we go on vacation, and even back when, I first got married, a couple days without drawing, I'd be like, okay, that's cool. But then, day 3 or 4, I'd be kind of getting antsy, like, okay, I gotta draw something, you
Yep.
know, and that's pretty much how it's always been. So it's, just something I always like doing and and stuff.
Yeah, going a week is like maddening if you can't pick up a pencil and start drawing.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been in my professional life, um, because what, as a kid and in high school and stuff, it's just all the time, just because
Yeah.
you're just trying to get better. And the only way you can get better is by doing it. And then, when I went
Hmm.
to the Kubert school, for art school for college, I can't remember what teacher it was. I want to say it was Jose Delbo, said, you've got, everybody has 10,000 bad drawings in them. So get to it. You got to get those out. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I never really heard that before. So um that was it. I would draw all the time, but then when I became a professional, it I still obviously enjoy doing it. And then on weekends and stuff, because now I'm getting, I'm getting paid to do it, but it's like I tell everybody, like, I had an eye doctor appointment today, and the doctor was like, "Oh, you're a cartoonist. That's just so cool." And it was funny because then she goes, I mean, I'm sure there's days where it's not, but you know what I mean. And I was like, no, I totally get it. Look, it's better than, digging ditches, whatever. But
Hmm.
there are days where it's like, ugh, you read the script and you're like, I don't want to draw that. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a labor, to do. I mean, it's better now because I'm doing my own thing,
Hmm.
but working for somebody else, getting the script, there would definitely be like, oh, I got to draw this or I got to draw that. So on weekends is when I would try to set aside, my time to just, in a sketchbook or whatever, just try and draw something for fun that I want to do, you know.
And do you remember what you were first drawing when you were young?
Yeah, I collected Hot Wheels cars and Matchbox and stuff. Um, my dad was a coin collector, so I never got into that, but I got into collecting cars. Something I just always liked cars, so I was drawing cars. Probably not well. I'm sure if I go through my closet, I still have some of that stuff. But I was just drawing cars, different types of cars. Copying the Matchbox cars and stuff. And it wasn't until early, like 80, 81, somewhere around there, I saw Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, the cartoon. And even though I saw Super Friends before that and Space Ghost, they just didn't really click like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends did. And I was like, oh, I'm going to draw that stuff. So I just kind of switched over and was like, I think I'll try and start drawing, superheroes and whatnot. And then I got into comics. And when I got into comics around 1982, 83, I obviously saw the credits and was like, "Oh, people get paid to do this stuff." And then, it just goes to the fascination with comic books and collecting those and seeing the different art styles and, copying them and, you know, moving forward like that way. Marcus in the house.
Yeah. And so in how to drawing, drawing dynamic comics, you show a picture from the character Apollo that you
hmm
drew when you were 14.
hmm
So when did you start developing characters, or was that the first one?
So that was the first one. That was definitely the first one. And it was basically, if I remember right, it was right around the time the Marvel superheroes role playing game came out. And I never really did role playing games much. I mean, I knew of Dungeons and Dragons and all that, and I didn't have anything against that stuff. I had friends that played it, but
Dennis.
once again, in my free time, it was just all about wanting to draw and better myself that way. So when it came to video games and the role playing games, I was just like, yeah, I could do that, or I could just try and practice and get better. But when the Marvel superhero one came out, because it was Marvel superheroes, and that's what I really connected to more at the time, and you could create your own characters, that's when I, started doing that with Apollo. Penumbra was actually drawn back then as well. And
Monarch?
no, Monarch didn't come along until I actually did First Man as a book uh, in 1996. It came out in 97 through Image, and that's when Monarch did. But Apollo, as he was known then, and Penumbra were designed, back then when I was a kid, and then a few other characters that I'm sure I still have the original Marvel Superheroes role playing game I had when I was a kid. I'm sure there's other drawings in there as well. So,
Yeah. And then, so that book came out in Image. Was that one of your first exercise into comics, or was it working in the Marvel or at one of the other
oh
Image?
no. So First Man, like I said, came out in 96, 97, something around there. And I broke into the business when I was a senior at the Kubert School in 1991. The editor I was working for was really cool. And when I got the job, it was a couple months before graduation. And I said, don't worry about it. I'll work on both, school assignments and this. And he was like, no, I want you to just focus on finishing school. This is an inventory job, which means there wasn't really a deadline on it. And he said, I'm having the script worked on and I'll have it ready for you, when you graduate. So let's just stay in touch over the phone, whatever it might be every couple of weeks until I graduate. I don't exactly remember, but I do remember, when I graduated, I contacted him, like he said, and he had the script ready. So when I moved back home, I could start working on the book. So, I did that was DC. Then I went to Marvel. Then I did some Image stuff. From Image, it was I think Valiant, but it was Acclaim. Was it Acclaim or Valiant first? I think it was Valiant, and then Acclaim bought them. So I did work for them, and then after that, DC, and then I think I did that issue of First Man. So, and I only did one because, it's create your own book. The way Image works is there's no pay or anything. They'll print it and they take a flat fee, which as far as I know, they still do. And then after they, deduct, printing costs and like printing setup fees, because you'd send in the files, they would do all the setup and stuff for the printer. So after they deducted all that and their fee, you'd get what's left over. And what was left over was like, oh, that's not really enough to do it monthly. If I was doing everything in regards to coloring and lettering, I probably could have, but then, I'm not fast enough to do all that monthly. I could pencil and ink something back then pretty much in 4 to 5 weeks, probably 5, but there's no way I could have done the coloring and lettering as well, and there just wasn't enough left over to pay somebody to do that stuff. So I was just like, okay, gave it a shot, back to the mainstream. So
And then, so how long did you work in mainstream before you decided to go uh, independent? And what made you decide to go independent?
pretty much until that's I remember. So what made me go independent was basically it was a couple things. One, the mainstream stuff. The last company I worked for, excuse me, was Ominous Press, which was a company my buddy Bart Sears created, and it was our second go around with doing Ominous Press. We originally did it in the early 90s, 93, 94. So in 2015, 16, we brought it back with a few other guys to try and give it a whirl again. I did a 4-issue miniseries. I was also the art director for the company as well. And, just wasn't meant to be that time around either. So once I finished the 4-issue miniseries, it was around 2018, 19, something like that. And I just decided, I'm not getting any younger. I turned 50 in 2019. And I do remember thinking, I'm not getting any younger. I knew of other people doing the crowdfund thing, trying to get their books out there and stuff. And I was like, well, I could give that a shot. I mean, I didn't want to basically go, okay, let another 10, 15, 20, whatever it be, years go by and kick myself for not trying to do it. So, yeah, and one of the things too was, that's 2019, let's say. So I stopped working for the mainstream technically around 2015, end of 2015. I did the Ominous Press stuff for the next couple years. The 4 issues took a little longer to get done because I was working on some outside comics type work as well. So I'd say it was around 2000, including that stuff. I was mainstream from basically 91 until 2018, 19.
And which was your,
And
sorry.
oh no, I was just going to say, so the other thing too was in 2019, I thought, wow, First Man came out from Image in 1997, 22 years ago. And I was just like, if I would have, instead of just kind of like the first issue comes out, I see what I make and I go, oh, I can't do this. If I would have said, okay, I can't do this monthly, but what if I draw, 2 pages a month with, paying work, mainstream work? Well, in a year, if I did 2 pages a month, just over 10 months, that's basically a full book, 20 pages. And then I thought about it and I'm like, First Man was 22 years ago in 1999 or in 2019. If I did that and I just did 1 issue a year, I'd have 20 issues of First Man out. So that was our thing. I was like, I'm turning 50. I thought about, that time frame and stuff. And I was like, I just can't, not that I wasted anything, but it was basically now or never in a way to do my own stuff. So that's why I took the leap or whatever to do the crowdfunding and try and build something.
And then I was going to ask you how did the first crowdfund go for you? And so was it First Man Volume 2, or did you redo the first issue?
So actually the first crowdfund was a book called Jungle Lords Ultra, which I marketed as a flip book. And it really was. I don't have a copy sitting next to me, but basically, if you hold the book up and you're looking at the front cover, if you flip it, you would be looking at another cover. So, and then you would open it up that way and read through it. And then you knew when the story was over because pages were upside down because it's a flip book. So that was a book called Jungle Lords Ultra. And Jungle Lords was, I grew up, I always liked Tarzan. And Jungle Lords was kind of my take on that with a little twist to it. So it was kind of like, I don't know if you ever saw the show King of Queens
Oh yeah.
with, yeah, Leah Remini and
Mhm.
oh my God, it's Kevin. What's his last name? The actor,
Kevin James.
Kevin James. Yes, Kevin James.
Yeah,
He
I grew
needs
up
to
in the
come back
90s,
to
so
TV. I love Kevin James stand up and his sitcom stuff. Anyhow, so it's kind of like Tarzan and Jane with kind of a humor of King of Queens, from the attitude that each
mm,
character had. So that was that. And then Ultra, the flip side of it was a superhero that I created that he was just called Ultra. It's like Ultra, the ultimate man, or whatever. And he's just, some 19, 20-year-old slacker playing a video game and it's a thunderstorm, electricity strikes and goes through the TV and juices him. And once he recovers, he looks in the mirror, he's all jacked out. He's got these powers now and such. So that was my first one, which I actually did on Kickstarter because I didn't even know what Indiegogo was. I had never even, like, at that point, I just thought there was Kickstarter and that was it. So, because I knew people using Kickstarter,
mhm.
and so that's what I knew. So I did that. And then my next one was First Man, and I called it 1.2. That's the one you held up. Hindsight being 2020, I should have just said one because
Mhm.
people are like 1.2, what do you mean? And it was just, if I called it one, nobody won, that question wouldn't have happened. And it would have just been like First Man one. But I said 1.2 because I took the original First Man pages that came out, from the single issue. I redrew a few things because, the book at this point is 23, 24 years old. So I redrew a few things. I had the whole thing recolored. It was rescripted as well. I was working with a buddy of mine named Rob Snyder, who I've known since I was like 18, and he was helping with the scripting on it. And we fleshed out the rest of the story basically for that First Man one that I did the crowdfund for in Indiegogo. So that turned out to be, it was a 64-page book. I think it was like 54, 56 a story. And then after that, did First Man 2. And then after that, I wanted to try something else. And that's where my buddy Dennis and I came up with Kor-Drath.
And I know there's a few fans that liked First Man, and I like it too. It was a pretty good book. But
Thank
do you
you.
think you'll revisit it after Kor-Drath, or is Kor-Drath going to be the new thing ongoing?
No, I'd like to because First Man, I try to do each book is like a self-contained story, but then there is a subplot or
Mhm.
whatever that goes through. So I'd like to do a third one to kind of wrap it all up, kind of like Graham's doing with his third Monster Island book. He's basically wrapping it up with that one. So I'd like to do a third one at some point to wrap it up. But right now the focus is on Kor-Drath to get that out. So.
And you think Green Lantern and Spider-Man kind of played a lot of influence into First Man? It's like,
yeah, I think so. I always liked the humor of Spider-Man. I mean, I like my taste in comics growing up. I like, the first book I ever bought was Captain America. I love Superman. Do I like Batman? Yeah. Do I love Batman? No. Like, I got to draw Batman, so I can go, cool, I got to draw Batman.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if I never did, he's not a character that I'm like, darn it, I never got to draw him.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I got to draw Superman, and that was one that I'm like, yes, I got to draw Superman. Same with Green Lantern. So I like the brighter, I guess you could say, happier, more positive type characters. And then Spider-Man, I like humor. I liked growing up, I liked the Tick.
Mm-hmm.
I liked Megaton Man. Now, of course, those were parodies and over exaggerations of superheroes, but I like humor in the stuff. So with First Man, I basically took things I loved, which is kind of like the humor of Spider-Man, Captain Marvel, the elements of both. The Marvel one that Jim Starlin did in the 70s, whereas it's cosmic and space,
Mm-hmm.
but then the one that we know of originally, well, now he's called Shazam, but he was originally Captain Marvel in the Golden Age. And what I liked about him was he was, Billy Batson, that 12-year-old kid that said the magic word and boom, changed. So First Man is he's not a 12-year-old, he's a freshman in college. He's still, just a skinny type, 5'8", 5'9", build type guy. And there's no magic word or anything, but he does change into the 7-foot tall, First Man character. It's almost kind of like Firestorm in a way too. That's another one growing up I really liked with, they would merge. And when Firestorm was flying around as Ronnie Raymond, he could still hear the doctor in his head, except with First Man, he doesn't hear the essence. And then with Green Lantern, I guess the tie-in there is, Green Lantern, it has the ring. Each ring has a protector over a different sector through all the galaxies and stuff. And, Hal Jordan protects sector, is it 2084 or 28? I can't remember anymore, but there's tons of them. And with First Man, there's basically these 10 essences that were spread across the universe or the galaxies, because if they all get collected by one person, all hell could break loose. 2814. There you go, Marcus. I knew you'd know. So in First Man, Luke Henry basically receives this essence because the character that originally had it got killed. And the essence was able, before the essence got absorbed by who killed him, was able to jet off basically to inhabit Luke. And he inhabited him for, characteristics that he has, kind of like the ring chose Hal Jordan for being fearless and whatnot. So yeah, all those things kind of played into First Man, which I think you look at, I mean, what's that saying? There's nothing new under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think you can almost look at a lot of books that are out and just go, oh yeah, this is kind of a mishmash of this and this. Mm-hmm. And, when you talk to the creators and stuff, they'll even say like, oh yeah, I love this type of stuff growing up. So I want to do a book that had a little element of that and, an element of that and stuff.
Now, I saw a cover for a character called Intrepid on your website.
Oh yeah.
Is that a new character, or was that for?
No, that is, so that goes back to Ominous Press back in 93, 94 when I originally did it with Bart Sears when Bart first created Ominous Press back then. Thank you, Marcus.
I would consider
Back then, yeah,
Herbert's.
because God, I'm trying to remember right. If I remember right, his mom's not around anymore. That's how long it's been. Once I start working on something else. But anyhow, so Intrepid goes back. That's a character that Bart created for Ominous Press. He created a ton of characters for Ominous Press. And Intrepid was one that, if Ominous Press would have succeeded back in the early 90s, was a character I was going to draw. So what happened was I did draw a 7 or 8 page story with Intrepid back then, but never saw print. So when we did Ominous Press again in 2016 through 2018, the first 4 books that we put out were reprints of the 3 books we put out in the early 90s. And we added new material to them as well. And then we also, that original story arc from back then was supposed to be 4 issues. So the 4th issue, we finished it because we figured instead of putting new stuff out when we brought Ominous back in 2016, let's finish what we started. So we put those 3 out, reprinted the first 3. All new material was included in those books as well. And then the 4th book was all brand new material to finish that first story arc. And we said, well, why don't we print that Intrepid story? So once again, that story was 22 years old. So I went in and redrew a couple things. I didn't want to redraw the whole thing, but there were a few things I was like, I can definitely, looking at the whole thing, I was like, I can do this whole thing better. But once again, we wanted to keep it as close to the original as we could. So I touched up just a few things. It was originally colored back in the day, but we did have it recolored, and it was never lettered back then because it never got that far. So, we had it lettered and everything. That was originally printed as a backup story in one of the first 4 issues that we put back out. But, we didn't solicit those through Diamond or anything. Those were basically, you could get them at conventions and through the Ominous website. So since it didn't really have a wide audience, I asked Bart, I was like, do you care if I print this as an ash can, just a little 8-page ash can? He's like, no, go ahead. So the actual cover to it was going to be a poster back in the early 90s for Ominous Press as well. And since that never happened, we had it colored, and I popped the logo on it and figured we, use that for the cover for the ash can. So, I printed it up and just, have those that I take to cons, and, it was an add-on for First Man. I think it was an add-on for the first Kor-Drath book as well. So that's what that is.
And we'll get to Kor-Drath in a moment, but I did have another question. On your website, it was listing in the About page the different companies you worked for, and one of them was the Idaho Potato Company. So what did you do for them?
So it's the Idaho Potato. It's the Idaho Potato Commission.
Oh,
I don't know how I have it written on my site. It might just say Idaho Potato CO, so people could say company, but it's commission.
Yes, commission.
Yeah. And I basically, it was 2000. I always go by where I was living at the time. We've been in Charlotte since 2005, but we've been in 1, 2, 3, 4 houses. So I think back to the house I was living in when I drew it, and that gives me the year. So it was 2010. And I got an email from an ad agency out in LA, and they said, hey, we're doing, we've got this assignment. Our client is the Idaho Potato Commission, and they want us to create basically faux comic book covers. We'll supply the text, we'll supply the tagline and the title, and we just want you to draw 2 of the 8, because they had 3 other artists to do the other 6 covers. So each artist did 2 covers. And I was like, okay. and one of them was a Doctor Strange type character, and one of them was a Western. Um, so I did them, and I made up the logo, did all the stuff, and that was that. And then a year later, I get an email from the same guy, and he's like, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me, but last year you did blah blah blah." And I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I remember that." And he was like, "Yeah, so we're working with Idaho Potato again, and they want to do another comic style campaign, ad campaign." And this was all business to business, so the public didn't see it, which,
Mhm.
I mean, I would have liked it if it was like an ad that was retail. So, oh, here's an ad in your newspaper and people saw it. But it was business to business. It is what it is. It was a gig, and advertising pays well. So, and it was fun. But this time they wanted actual paneled pages. And the character for this was kind of like a Indiana Jones type character, but he was a stock, I mean, for lack of a better word, a stock boy, but I mean, he was a man. So, a good looking dude. He had an apron on like you'd see in like a guy in a grocery store.
Mhm.
And it was the nice part about it was he said, we're going to be doing, I think for that first year, it was like 4 to 6 pages, each one being a single, story, not continuous. And he goes, honestly, once we got in last year, all 8 covers, yours just stood out so much compared to the other 3 guys we had that we were wondering if you could do all 6, if you had the time to do all, whether it was 4 or 6. One, to keep it consistent, because I mean, I could have told you without even seeing other guys' work, if you're hiring 4 different artists to do 8 covers, 2 apiece, they're not going to be consistent.
Mhm.
So, like I said, he's like, out of everybody we hired, he's like, you're the actual only one that, we were able to get that actually works in comics. These other guys, they put out, I can't remember the name of the company, and I think it's all digital now, but back then and way through the 90s, there was a big fat illustrator book that me as an artist could pay to be in. So like I would pay, I never did it, but they would send the books out to try and, get you to do it. And basically I could create a full page ad for my work, my website, whatever, and I would pay them 3 grand. That was the fee to get in that book at the time. And that book they would basically send out to art directors all over. And then art directors could look through it, and you could actually look in the index for different styles and stuff. So if you're like, oh, I want cartoony, you could look at that section. Or if I want painted realistic, that section. So anyhow, he's like, can you do all of them? And I said, sure. So I did all of them. And then once again, this gig took probably, 3 4 months while I was working on regular comic book stuff, and then it was done. And I'm like, cool, that was fun. And then the next year, the guy emailed me again, and pretty much over the course of, I want to say, 13 years, I think there was maybe a gap after the first 6 or 7 years of like 2 years, maybe three, where, you know, uh, they contacted me. I remember, the year they contacted me and they said, hey, just want to let you know, because we've been doing this for like 6 years now, 7 years, whatever it was. The Idaho Potato Commission, they're still our client, but they want to do something else this year. But, because it's been like 6 years straight, 7 years straight, whatever, we didn't want you to think like, oh, what the heck. So, you know, if anything ever comes up and we can use you, we'll definitely reach out. I was like, okay, whatever. I mean, you never count on something like that being a yearly thing. So I was like, yeah, everything ends. So it was like a year or two goes by, and then boom, I get an email and it's a different art director. And she was like, I'm so and so. You used to work with so and so. He's not here anymore. But anyhow, Idaho Potato wants to do it again, and blah blah blah. So I did it for another 3 or 4 years, something like that. And now it's been, I think the last time I did stuff for him was 2022, maybe. Might have been the last year. So, if it comes around again, it comes around again. If it doesn't, it was fun while it lasted. They made bobbleheads out of some of my stuff and little tchotchkes and stuff. So it was cool.
That's like a fun project. And then
Yeah.
you also did comics for the Chicago Bears and had that.
Yeah. In 2018, that's why that 4-issue miniseries kind of took me a little while to do, because in 2000, technically I started doing stuff for the Bears in 2017, I want to say. And it wasn't straight to the Bears. So I never worked with the Bears directly. I worked with a company that is owned by a guy and created by a guy that used to play for the Bears. And he's a big comic book fan, and he retired like 6, 7 years ago now, I think, something like that. So he played for the Bears in most of the 2000s and stuff. He was drafted in the 2000s, played for him mid 2000s for close to a decade, and he created this company because he's a big comic book fan. And he basically pitched this idea to the Bears of having players drawn, with as superheroes, superpowers and stuff, but in uniform, but exaggerated. So obviously I had to get the likeness down, but when it came to the bodies and stuff, I could exaggerate them like I draw superhero stuff. It wasn't like, oh, trace this photo or whatever. It was like, no, we want what you do best, which is big, bulky superhero stuff. Just make sure the likenesses are on point. And that was in 2018 for that season. This was like their campaign for the whole football season. So it was drawing 20 some players, but it was like 3 poses for each player. Then there was some additional art they needed, like opponent stadiums for when they were at away games. And then every opposing team they played, we created a character to represent that opposing team, because we couldn't draw any, obviously, players or anything, because they don't have the license. They only can do bear stuff. And so that was basically a year's worth of work in 2018. And then every season since, we do stuff right around the spring when the draft happens. And it's like 5 or 6 players a year, a couple of the key draft picks. And then if there's big trades or anything they do, I draw them. And, knock on wood, I've been doing that every year since 2018, did it again this year. And I'm hoping that, next year they continue it as well.
You don't, you not do comics full time? You do freelance too, or is the freelance?
Yeah, I mean, I do some freelance stuff. The most I do now is that bear stuff, which, takes a few months to do. And then other than that, it's pretty much, my stuff, the crowdfund stuff, Kor-Drath now. And then, if there's commissions throughout the year, I might get, somebody emailing for commission, a private piece or something.
And then how did you get involved with Guptill, the company that you did the drawing dynamic comics through? And,
Watson Guptill. So they are now, I believe Random House bought them probably a decade ago. So, I got the idea for the drawing book in 1990. It came out in 97. So it was around August of 95. I got the idea for a drawing book because at that time, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way was still like, if you went to a bookstore, that was it. I mean, there were some other books on like cartooning, but not comic books. It was, Bigfoot cartooning, which is how they describe newspaper stuff, because it's cartoony And the reason they call it Bigfoot is because a lot of cartoon characters and strips have big feet. So that's what they called it. But the only real book that focused just on comic books, even in 1995, was pretty much How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. There might have been one or two others, but that was it. So I was like, well, why not try and do something else? Try and do another book. So I thought, let me just stop that. So I thought, okay, go to the bookstore, because I didn't know how to write a book proposal, but I knew I had to submit something, and I didn't know who to pitch it to either. So I went to, I don't know what bookstore it was. We'll just say Barnes and Noble back then. And the first thing I did was go to the art section, which anytime I go to a bookstore, even to this day, I always go right to the art section to see what art books they have. So I went to the art section. I just looked, and I noticed that most of the art books were published by Watson Guptill, and they had tons of them. They had watercolor painting, acrylic painting, oil painting, painting figures, anatomy, whatever. So I was like, okay. So I opened up one. This is before, well, it's before smartphones, so no cameras on the phone. So I wrote down the address, and I wrote down, I looked through a few of them, and there was one editor's name that was like mentioned in a few of them. So I figured, okay, she's the contact. So I got their, address and her name. And then I went to another part of Barnes and Noble where I asked somebody, and I was like, "Do you have any books on how to write book proposals?" And they're like, "Yeah." So lo and behold, there was a book on how to write book proposals. Well, I'm cheap. So I was like, well, I'm not going to buy this. I'm just going to look at the table of contents and take notes. So I just looked at the table of contents and basically found a chapter that was like, what should you include in a book proposal? And I just took, notes down of what should be included. Because I didn't it's not like it's one of those things. You can write a book on anything. I mean, this book wasn't like massive thick, but it was still at least 100 pages, if not more, on how to write a book proposal. And I just took notes on like, okay, obviously your cover letter should include stuff about yourself, your experience, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, okay, you know, do a real brief paragraph on what each chapter is going to contain, and try to keep it, these people are busy. So, try to keep it less than, or no more than say 2 pages, typed out 8.5 by 11 pages. So I was like, okay. So I just went and wrote up a book proposal and thought about the different chapters and all that stuff, wrote up a book proposal, wrote up a cover letter, printed it out, grabbed like 5 or 6 of my comics that have come out at that time, threw it in a priority envelope. Because I did remember from the Kubert School, one of the things they said was, because once again, this is all back when it was snail mail. So they always said at the Kubert School, if you're mailing your samples up to Marvel or DC or, any comic book company, they said, basically 3 things. If you can do it FedEx overnight, do that, because then you can track it and see it got delivered. If that's out of bounds, because I mean FedEx overnight can be expensive, they said do priority mail, same thing. That's 2 to 3 days and you can track it. And they said if you can't do that and you're literally going to do first class snail mail, they said, use anything but a yellow envelope that, people put 8.5 by 11 stuff in, because that's the most common envelope and you want to stick out. So use a colored envelope. So when they get their mail dumped on their desk, this colored envelope might stick out. Well, priority mail wasn't much back then, still not much now. So I did it priority mail. I remember my wife saying, "Oh, when do you think you'll hear something?" And I told her flat, and this was day I mailed it. And let's just say it was a Tuesday, because I don't remember the day of the week. We'll say it was a Tuesday I mailed it. And I said, "Are you kidding me?" I said, I said, this editor, it was a woman. I said, she probably gets so much stuff, so many book proposals. I said, I'll be lucky if I ever hear anything, you know? And I said, but you never know. Yeah. Once again, my thought process with a lot of things, and definitely was with this, is, it took what, maybe 8-10 hours to write the book proposal because I had to think of the chapters and everything. And then what, $5 to mail it? I said, so 10 hours and $5. Best case scenario, I get a book deal. Worst case scenario, I'll never hear anything. And I blew $5 in 10 hours. And if I don't hear anything, I could pitch it to another publisher. Well, 2 days later, and I was living in Florida and they're in New York City. 2 days later, my phone rings, typical landline phone rings, no caller ID or anything. So I just pick it up and I'm like, hello. And, it's a woman and she's like, is Andy Smith there? God's honest truth, I thought it was a solicitor, right? Trying to sell me something. So I don't get rude with solicitors. Uh, Honestly, lots of times if I'm at a stage of my work during the day where I could chat and I don't need a lot of brain power for what I'm working on at that time, I'll keep them on the phone. I'll end up turning down whatever they're trying to sell, but it just gives me something to do while I'm inking or something. But at this point, when she called, I must have been penciling something. And when I'm penciling, it takes more brain power for me. So I generally don't like to talk or engage with anybody. So I was just like, yeah, this is him. And she's like, this is so-and-so from Watson Guptill. And it still didn't click. I was like, okay. And she goes, yeah, we got your book proposal, or I got your book proposal and I want to talk to you about publishing it. And that's when obviously the light went off and I was like, oh, awesome. That's cool. Thanks for calling. So whole demeanor changed. What's up, Will? So whole demeanor changed and everything. And like I said, I wasn't like super rude or anything. So it's not like she was like, well, now you're nice. She was just like, yeah, so, this is it. And it just, 2 days later to the day, they got the envelope. She opened it, called me, and we worked out well, we didn't work anything out. It was I was first time never doing this before. So it was basically, okay, this is your advance, take it or leave it. And, your deadline is basically a year from now. It's like, okay. And she said, I'm going to pass you off to this editor, because she was like a supervising editor. So she passed me off to the actual editor I'd be working with on the book. And it was basically, okay, just check in every couple months. The book's due in a year, but we don't want to not hear from you until you turn in the final thing. So check in every couple months. I was like, all right. And that's what we did. And turned it in like August of 96. And it came out in June of 97, or turned it in. Okay. I take it back. I turned it in 97. And was it 97? Oh, I got my years messed up. I was thinking something else. I turned it in and I started it in 98, finished it in 99, turned it in 99, and it came out in June of 2000 because it came out the month I moved to Tampa to work for CrossGen in Tampa.
And I picked it up in 2011.
Well, there you go. So you do not have a first. Well, depending on if you bought it new or used, you might have a first. If you bought it new, it's probably not a first print. If you bought it used, it could be.
It was new because I got it at Borders when they were still a thing.
God, I love Borders. I hate seeing, but like where I live now, there used to be a Borders. I mean, I thought this was stupid, but it's kind of like McDonald's, Burger King. There was a Borders. I could walk across the street and there was a Barnes and Noble. Mm-hmm. I just loved it because, it's a tangent, but yeah, did they carry some overlap in books when it came to novels? Of course they did. But I guarantee you, I could look at the art section in Borders and the art section in Barnes and Noble and see some overlap, but also see different stuff. So.
And then it's been some years since that book was published. Would there be anything that you would add to it now? Or do you think it was the sum of your
I would. I mean, like anything, so next year is its 25th anniversary. And I haven't put any pencil to paper. Actually, no, I take it back. I did make some notes. I thought about doing a 25th anniversary edition as a crowdfund and then stretch goals So out of the gate, I would automatically add maybe 12 pages to it, just so it's not the exact same thing. And then stretch goals would be like, oh, we hit this, I'll add 12 more. Oh, we hit this, I'll add, 12 more. But so right now it's 144 pages. If I were to do this, my thought was I would keep it looking the way it looks now. I would do either a new cover or keep that cover and slap a big 25th anniversary new material on it. But 144 page book that's 8.5 by 11, because that's the size of it, full color is not something that is cheap to print. And I don't know. I just have to run some numbers. I don't know how well How to Draw book would do as a crowdfund.
Mm.
A graphic novel, that's something totally different because it's a wide audience.
Yeah.
But you do a How to Draw book, I'm looking at narrowing the audience down to diehards, that want to work on their drawing ability, or if a parent were to see it and go, "Ooh, that'd be cool for my son or daughter that likes to draw." And then there might be a little bit of overlap with just people that are fans of my work but have no drawing aspiration whatsoever. Comic book boot camp. Oh, really? I'll have to go search that. Well, so just to give a plug to my buddy Bart Sears, unless you're not talking about Bart, are you? Because my buddy Bart Sears just launched, he put out, so Bart did the drawing tutorials in Wizard Magazine through almost all the 90s, and he owns all that material. So back when we did Ominous Press in 2017, 2018, we put out 2 new volumes featuring those tutorials as hardcover books. And he just launched a Kickstarter because they were low print run. He just launched a Kickstarter putting them out again as soft covers. So, but I don't think that's what you're talking about, Will, because I think Comic Book Boot Camp is something else. So I'll have to check. Yeah, that's what I thought. It's I'll have to go search that, because so I love collecting How to Draw books still. That's why I check them at art store or Amazon and bookstores, because if I see a good How to Draw book, I'll still buy it. I don't care. So I don't know. I just got to run some numbers and basically do the work. I assume most people do this when they think about a campaign, which is think worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And go, what if I only sell 50 of them? Well, then I got to see, okay, well, I wouldn't just print 50. I'd print probably 100. Well, what would it cost to print 100 books that are, let's say, 160 pages, and see if it's something that's worthwhile.
Like Amazon has that the publisher feature on there. Do you think something like that could work for it? Or
I'd have to look into it and see what exactly that entails, because if I know what you're talking about, I haven't researched it enough. That is fantastic if you're a novelist, because a novel has a color cover and black and white, obviously, interiors, because it's just type on a page. And those things are dirt cheap to print. So you can do that print on, because that's basically, as far as I know, that's like print on demand. So you can print on demand a novel, and the price point isn't that much higher than if the publisher, if a publisher was like, oh yeah, we're going to print 10,000 of these, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if it's print on demand, but it's full color on the inside and it's that larger size, the price point could go. So like the price point on, Drawn Dynamic Comics is $19.95, 144 pages. Print on demand, without doing any research, I'm just guessing, print on demand for that book could be anywhere from 35 to 40 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I just have to look into it.
Fabrizio Aiello did the Horse H. Hoover. through Amazon On Demand, and
Hmm.
that was like $20 for the book.
How
But
many
that's a
pages
smaller.
was it roughly?
I think it was it, I lent my copy to my friends. I don't have it for reference, but I think it was like
Was it
72,
a is it a
3
graphic
stories.
novel?
Yeah,
Yeah, so full
it's a
color
comic.
graphic novel. You said it was like 72 pages
Hmm.
and it was like comic book size, right?
Yeah,
Proportion.
a little bit bigger. Like that.
Yeah, and it's like 20. Yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, it's obviously something to definitely look into. I mean, there's so many things I thought about. I even thought about doing it as, and this is just a print cost thing, as comic book size
Hmm.
as well. Because the thing with that book is, so I have the rights, the printing rights back to it. Once it went up to 7 or 8 printings.
Hmm.
So that's, I don't know if they do a new printing every year. I don't know how that works, but it was basically in print. It came out in 2000. It was in print, I think, up into the 2010s somewhere, maybe. Anyhow, once it was out of print, and this was all my research where I would just look on Amazon, and basically, if you couldn't buy it new, it's kind of like, well, it's out of print. If it was all just used sellers, I just contacted Watson Gupta and I said, hey, could I get the rights back so I can print it? Because I mean, technically, I own it all. They just had the printing rights. And they're like, yeah. So they sent me paperwork. I signed it. So boom, I got the print rights. The thing is, since it was, and they don't owe this to me anyhow, but since it was printed in the year 2000, somebody has the print files, but I don't.
Oh, wow.
So the hard part is I've got all my original art to it because it was all, drawn on paper. And
Hmm.
even if I did new material, it would be as well. But I sent it all to them just like I would send stuff to DC and Marvel. They printed the book, they sent me all my originals back. So I have all their originals, but I don't have any of the print files. So I would have to scan in every original. I would have to basically retype all the text that's in the book because there's no point in even using my original Word document because they edited it and all
Hmm.
that. So I'd have to retype all that and pay a designer to basically put the book together again. So I mean, I could always play with different sizes of it, like comic book or 8.5 by 11. But like I said, it's not too late if I wanted to do a 25th anniversary of it. I basically, in my mind, have all of 2025 to run a campaign and get it out there. So
And then you did another book for him. It was like making, was it
drawing
like,
American manga
yeah,
superheroes.
that was it. And do you have the rights to that one too, or
I
you have
don't, but I should get them because that was a one and done. That was one printing and that was it. The thing that what happened was I did the first one. The first one, obviously, you know, even before when it was still in its first printing, because obviously I got royalties and stuff, so I know how it did. They were like, "We want you to do another book," and I was just busy, and it took a
yeah,
year to do it. Now, if I just sat down and had nothing else to do, it wouldn't have taken me a year to do that book. It probably would have taken me 3 to 4 months. But they give you a year because I'm not Stephen King. So the advance they gave me was like, that's cool. It's not enough to live off of for a year or half a year or 3 months, but it's nice. Um, so they wanted me to do another one, and I was just busy. So I put it off, And then in 2003, somewhere around there, because they kept asking, I was like, yeah, okay. And I said, I've got two different ideas. One was a follow up to that one. So it just was a continuation, basically. And then another one was drawing American manga superheroes. And I want to do the continuation first. And they said, no, we want you to do drawing American manga superheroes first. And I was like, okay. So I did that one. And, it came out, I think, in 2007. And it did just, the one printing. and that was it, which obviously means it wasn't a huge seller for him. And I just got busy and never got around to doing the follow-up for Drawing Dynamic Comics. So I don't know if I have the print rights to it. I should probably email them and find out. I guess I never really thought about that one as much because it only did do the one. But there are aspects of it that instead of like reprinting that as a whole book, if I got the print rights back, I could take pieces of it to put into, you know, the if I did do like a 25th anniversary one, because there's still stuff that all drawing relates. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're doing, you know, realistic stuff like Alex Ross or you're doing, you know, Garfield. You still have to know the basic structure and shapes and lighting and stuff. It's just the extent of how you employ each of those into your work. You know, in Garfield, there's no lighting. Obviously, in Alex Ross, there's total realistic lighting and whatnot. So there's different levels. So,
and then, so with that one, do you have the originals in that, or is it kind of similar to the Dynamic Comics one, where it has like your characters all throughout it?
Oh yeah, no, it's all the, you know, I tried. So I used my characters twofold. One, in the first book, I was like, well, I'm going to use my characters because they're mine. And I just, right out of the gate, I didn't even think of trying to get the license for Marvel and DC to use theirs. I didn't even think about it. It's like, I'm going to use mine. In the second book, Drawing American Manga Superheroes, same thing. I was like, well, I'm going to use my characters again because it's a brand thing now. But I did. There's two characters in that book that, and it's, you know, it's a process thing where it's like, you know, the individual steps leading up to the finished drawing of a superhero and then a female superhero. And originally it was Superman and Wonder Woman. And I contacted DC. I went through their licensing department, and you gotta, you know, you have to send them, and this was all through email. So you got to send them like a write-up description of what you're doing with their characters. So for me, it was, you know, I'd like to use Superman and Wonder Woman. Here's the drawings that I did. This is what I'm using them for. And then they either give you approval or they don't. And they didn't give me approval. So I just went in and basically took the S off his chest, changed the colors. And then on Wonder Woman, I think I took off anything that resembled like the W and stuff, and then just changed her colors. And I just made up two different names for each character. So I tried, but because I figured for the second one, it just give it a little more street cred if it's like, oh yeah, Superman and Batman, or Superman and Wonder Woman in it. But they said no, and I was like, okay, that's cool. I'll just, you know, make up two more characters that I could use down the road if I ever wanted to, I guess. So.
And then getting to your most recent crowdfunding, which Aaron didn't remember. He thought Reckoning was the second one, and Awakening was the.
I know, that silly goose, Aaron.
So you're currently campaigning Kor-Drath, The Awakening, which is the sequel to Kor-Drath, The Reckoning.
Yes.
And so how did that project start out?
Kor-Drath itself started out, like I said, once First Man 2 was wrapping up, and what I mean is that book was literally at the printer. Dennis and I were driving to a convention in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is like 3.5, almost 4 hours from here. And I knew I wanted to do something else because, for, you know, the thing with these books are, it basically takes a year to do. With all the aspects of doing the crowdfund, promotion, and everything. Once again, I always say if I didn't have to do anything but come up here and draw and do nothing else, it wouldn't take a year to do this. So I want to do something else. I wanted to do something fantasy based because I did a Red Sonja Claw miniseries for Dynamite Entertainment, and then for DC they did a Claw 6-issue miniseries that I did after that. And Claw's basically Conan, except he has a messed up hand. That's why he's called Claw. So I knew I wanted to do something fantasy based, and Dennis is huge into that type of stuff. He's been into Dungeons and Dragons and role playing games since the very first edition of D&D came out back in the 80s. He's probably played every role playing game that's along those fantasy lines that there is. He's written fantasy short stories, read tons of fantasy novels. So we were driving, and I said, I want to do something different, as you know, because I talked to him about it. And I said, this is kind of what I want to do. Is this something you think you'd want to be a part of? Because I've never really considered myself just out of the gate, like I'm going to just write something from scratch. I'm better bouncing ideas off somebody and then kind of plodding along with it, or and basically throwing out like ideas. And then when it comes to sitting down and actually hammering out a script and dialogue and everything, I'd rather have somebody else do that. And then when I get it, read it over, make suggestions to the plot, tweak any dialogue, and throw my input that way.
Real quick, can
And
you
he was
see
like,
this?
"Yeah, what's that?
Can you see this?
Oh yeah."
Okay.
So I was like, "Yeah, that sounds great. Let's." He was like, "Yeah, let's do it. What are you thinking?" And I said, "Well, I want to do a barbarian fantasy type thing, and obviously, it's got to have a cool barbarian buff dude, and I want a hot chick in it as well." And because when people said, "Why did you want to draw comics?" Back in the day, even when I was in high school, I said, "Because I want to draw." Uh, I said, I said I want to draw big dudes and hot chicks. That's why I want to draw comics. And so I said they got to be in the book. I said I don't want it to be like a Conan Red Sonja in regards that Red Sonja pretty much looks like just a female barbarian. I definitely visually I want them to really contrast each other in what they wear and such. And the same goes through other aspects of the world building too. I want to do, just stuff that's different. I don't want to be tied down with like, well, in this type of world, there's just this, or whatever. And the other thing too is, and I told him, I said, now, besides reading some Conan growing up and reading Tarzan and reading very few John Carter Warlord of Mars comics, I don't really know much about fantasy stuff. I've seen obviously the Conan movie, I've seen Highlander, but I don't really, it's not something that I like it, but it's not like, oh, this came out, I got to run to the theater and see it. That's how I am with like Star Wars and Star Trek too. I like it, but I'm not like first in line, whatever. And he was like, okay. So we just talked about character traits and stuff. And I said, why don't you do a Google search for images that I don't know, you like or think are cool, and that'll give me a jumping off point for character designs. So he did, and he created a folder, and I looked at him like, yeah, okay. And I just, designed the characters. Kor-Drath, I did a couple, 2 or 3 different designs for, maybe 4. And I showed them to him, and we kind of both went back and forth about what we liked from each one for me to come up with the final for Kor-Drath. Adriana, I just did the one design, and he liked it and was like, oh yeah, that's awesome. So she was one and done. I think Necronite might have had 1 or 2. Lilnith was a one and done design. Vordoom the Undying, I think, was a one and done as well. And then the rest of the characters, basically, if it's a new character that I want to be drawing, more than once, I'll do a design on a standalone sheet of paper. If it's characters that I don't know, you might not see as much or something, I might just, as I'm drawing the page, be like, oh, got to make this guy up now, because that's kind of what I did when I was working for Marvel and DC. If there were any characters they wanted me to draw from scratch, I was like, well, they're not paying me a design fee, you know? So I was like, well, I'm just going to make it up on the page. How much input? I mean, I have as much input as I want. Dennis writes it. Like I said, we talk about it. He writes it up. I read the whole script over, and then if anything jumps out at me that I think could be done better with the flow of the story, or if there's something in it that I'm like, it'd be cooler if Kor-Drath did this instead of this, I just tell him. And if 9 times out of 10, it's like, okay, cool. And he'll make a note and rewrite it into the script. There's never really been an example I can think of where he's like, no, that just won't work with like the story. No all nude version of this. He brings that up, I assume, because when I did Jungle Lords Ultra, I did 2 versions of that flip book. I did a regular version where Jungle Lords Tarzan, well, his name's not Tarzan, but the male and female character are running around the jungle wearing the typical loincloth stuff. And then I got an idea to do a version where they're not wearing anything, because Tarzan was never wearing anything. The only reason they gave him a loincloth is because they put it on TV way back in the day in the movies and stuff. The original novels, he didn't go kill a lion to put a loincloth on. He's freaking Tarzan of the Apes. What's he care? So I did that version of Jungle Lords where they weren't wearing anything. And I mean, that was it. There was no sex in the book or anything. It's the same story. I didn't have to rewrite any dialogue or anything because to them it's natural. Why would they? She has an armband, I believe, and maybe a bracelet type on her wrist as well, which she still had, but it was just no point wearing the loincloths. And then on the flip side of the Ultra story, without giving the story away, there's 2 female villains in the book, superpowered villains in the book that he runs across. And there was a scene in the PG version that I did a homage to that famous shot when Spider-Man or Peter Parker first sees MJ in the doorway. So you're looking past his head in the foreground, and she's standing there from like right below the waist up in jeans and a black shirt. And she says, face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot. And I did a riff of that in Ultra for the PG version, but for the R-rated version, it's a lot spicier, we'll say. So, yeah, mailing. Well, Anna was too, because I sent a copy of Jungle Lords to Anna, and I asked Cecil, I was like, "What copy do you think I should send her?" And he goes, send her the nude version." So she got a kit. She was not expecting that when she got it. So
how long have you known your writing partner, Dennis?
What's it been? Probably, I'm going to say probably since 2000. I think it was after the first Avenger, so I'll go with 2013. Maybe 2014. But I'll say I'll go with a decade. Yeah.
And then did you meet at a con, or was it through a project you were working on together?
No, he was in fact I am. In fact, I know. It was 2013 because it's when we moved. I relate everything to where I was living. And we moved into this house in 2013. Unlike a lot of people where it's like, hey, where's the local comic shop? And they're like, oh my God, it's 20 miles away. Or what are you talking about? I have to do everything online. I literally live in the center of a triangle, and each point of the triangle is a comic shop. And the closest one to me is about 4 miles. And then the bottom point, I always say it's the look at a triangle. The closest one's the top 4 miles. The bottom points of the triangle, because they are on the same road. It's just that road changes the name. So the bottom 2 points of the triangle are probably 6 miles in each direction. Literally, like I could go to one or I could go to the other, but the closest one. So I start going to the closest one, And I still go to the other two every now and then as well, because the one of them, I've known the guy for 30 years. And so I was going to this one that's closest, and I go Wednesdays when new books come out, of course. And Dennis was, working there. And he was basically just there that day to help the guy out, because Wednesday's the busiest day for comic shops, because it's new comic day and whatnot. And he would also be the convention guy for he'd load the van. He would take the stock to cons, because Dennis is, besides a huge comic collector, he's also an appraiser for insurance companies for collection. So if I ever cared enough, I could be like, hey, Bozo, come over here and appraise my collection for the insurance company. And he was there. So I'd go on Wednesdays, and we would just, he'd let me in like a half hour before the store opened. So we would just shoot the shit and, got to know each other and had similar interests and stuff. And obviously comics, but then movies, and then TV shows, and just pop culture stuff in general. And started hanging out and stuff, and going to movies. And then we started doing the whole podcast thing, which we started doing before Kor-Drath. And yeah, so there you go. And then, we do our DNA show on Wednesdays at 3:00. But no, he went to an Iron Maiden concert tonight. And I'm like, so why aren't we doing our show at 3 in the afternoon if the concert's not till 8:00 tonight?
Well, now
he's
it's
like,
an A&A show.
What's that?
Now it's an A&A show.
That's right. So he's like, why am I not? I'm like, why am I not doing the show at 3 p.m.? Because the concert's not till like what, 6:00, doors open, because I know where it's at. And he's like, because he's going with a mutual friend of ours. He's like, because we're going to get together at like, 3:00 and grab some food and hang out and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, you're pre-gaming a concert? I'm like, oh my God. So that's where we differ. Honestly, he's been to, I honestly can't even tell you how many concerts he's been to, because he's been to so freaking many. I mean, you name a metal band from the 80s, and I guarantee he's been there. Name a, well, you look young.
Pink Floyd.
Of course he's seen Pink Floyd.
Of course. Rush.
Of course. You'd have to go off the wall. Like, I've never even heard of the band. Dennis and I are the same age. Maybe in the 80s, I knew the band called Wasp. I don't recall them now, but he's seen them. So you name it, he's seen. So he's a concert guy. I'm not a concert guy. I can count the number of concerts I've been to in my entire life on one hand. Maybe I need 7 fingers. Maybe. I'm just not a concert guy.
I just need one.
I don't. What's that?
I just need one.
What have you seen? Who have you seen?
Roger Waters, Us and Them tour. It was
there
2017.
You go. So I've seen Scorpions, Billy Idol,
nice.
Cheap Trick,
another good one.
Hootie and the Blowfish, Weird Al Yankovic, and Mannheim Steamroller, and Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Yes, Dennis has seen Winger. Yes, he has seen. I think he might have, maybe not Steely Dan, but I know he's seen Winger. So anyhow, I think I only need one hand. So I'm not a concert guy. I'm like, wait, you want me to go wait in line, be shoulder to shoulder, when I can just pop in a record or pop on a record or CD and crank it up as loud as I want? And to me, get the same feeling. He's like, it's not the same. You got to be right there and feel the pounding. And blah. I'm like, I've done it. Not a fan. So I'm good. He's seen Rush. Yeah. So he's at an Iron Maiden concert. Baby.
And I know you do the movies on Friday.
Yep.
Yeah. I've been waiting to see if you're going to go see Hellboy and the Crooked Man. Is that on your list, or?
I don't think that didn't go to theaters. Didn't they shoot that straight to streaming? Or when did it supposedly come out? Because we have not seen it, as in So we only go to AMC because we belong to the whole AMC thing where you can see 3 movies a week and blah 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 and it is a good deal. I mean, we see 1 movie a week
Mhm.
and it still pays, if we paid out of pocket or if I paid out of pocket for 1 movie a week, it'd be more than what it costs for the monthly thing. So, we'll see 1 movie a week. I mean, I've seen 2, but we usually just review 1.
Mhm.
And I have yet to see that Hellboy movie at a theater. If it was, yes, we'd go see it, but we've
Yeah.
not seen it.
I know
Now,
you can stream it on Amazon for like the theater price or something like that, but I don't know when it came out. I'd have
yeah,
to look
so
it
if
up.
it's on now, there's a few times a year, I'd say maybe 3 or 4 times a year tops, nothing's out that we want to see.
Mhm.
So we'll pick something from Netflix or Amazon or whatever to watch and review instead. Um, we're going tomorrow night to see Red One, the movie with Chris Evans and Dwayne Johnson, where Santa Claus gets kidnapped, and
Mhm.
Santa Claus is God. I always blank. Oh, J.K. Simmons plays Santa. So we're seeing that tomorrow night. We try to stay away from news articles and videos, besides the trailer, of course, so we can
Yeah.
go into it. Uh, but unfortunately, I saw the headline.
Mm.
I did not click it, but I saw the headline that said Red One is one of the worst movies you'll ever see. I find that hard to believe because
Mhm.
I
It looks.
watched Elevation last week and we
Oh
reviewed
yeah.
it, and that movie was a stinker. So
I didn't like Quiet Place in the first place, so something similar to that. So
this
I'll
was
have to.
basically, hey, let's do Quiet Place on a cheaper budget and hopefully it'll take off. And I'm
Mhm.
sorry to say it will not. Actually, I'm not sorry to say it because it was bad. But so yeah, so we're seeing Red One tomorrow night, and we'll do the review Friday morning to drop it.
It looks like a superhero Christmas movie, so it does look interesting to me. Some of the creature
Yeah, I
designs.
mean, J.K. Simmons is Santa Claus. The problem I have with that is J.K. Simmons in this movie, he's in shape. I mean, he's not like fat Santa. You know what I mean? He's not your typical Santa. I mean, he's not like jacked or anything, but at least in the previews, you're like, who's kidnapping this dude? You know? So I'm like, okay. But I mean,
Jack
I'm looking
Skeleton.
forward to it. It's got a good cast.
Hmm.
I like, I think it looks good. My daughter's going, so we'll see.
Hope you guys have fun with that. And
Oh yeah.
then, so what's the long-term plan for Kor-Drath? Is it going to be like a 3-book series or 5-book series, or do you have an end goal?
It's planned for 4 as of now. So that is basically the plan. It's planned for 4 of them. Once again, each one is basically self-contained. You get it tells a story, and you get to the end, and you're like, okay, I want to continue. You know, um, yeah. So that's the plan with it.
And do you plan on doing like the Christmas story like you did this year, or?
That depends. I mean, that was fun to do. I really enjoyed drawing it. It didn't it didn't set me like behind with the schedule I'm trying to keep on the main book because of the drawing style and stuff. If it was drawn the exact same way as the actual Kor-Drath graphic novel, I probably wouldn't have been able to do it because it's just more complicated than drawing in a children's book style. So it was fun to do. We didn't, we did the sign up page and all that, and every time we were on a stream, we would talk about the book, but I didn't do like a big, huge like launch and anything. Like I didn't bring the Comicsgate Kings like into it and stuff
Yeah.
because we kind of want to do it not like under the radar, but just like let's put it out there, see what happens.
Hmm.
It didn't make anything. I can tell you that. I mean, I don't think it would take a rocket scientist to just go look at Indiegogo and see what it made. And if you think that we made money off of what it shows it made, you'd be wrong. Um, but once again, because we kind of planned it like, well, I can just work on it when I'm working on the actual graphic novel. I mean, he wrote it in like a day. Just the writing process for that was just so much easier, obviously, than something like the actual graphic novel, which has more depth to it and stuff than a children's book. Pretty straightforward, simple story for kids. So I mean, he wrote it in a day. I could draw a page of it, pencil and ink a page of it in a day, no problem. Not even a full day. I'd like to do it again. We just need to approach how we're going to market it, I guess, differently now that we kind of know, because we kind of had an idea going in, like, well, if the graphic novel did this, I mean, this is a kid's book, and yeah, it's drawn in a different style, and yeah, it's a kid's book, but the price point's lower. And I kind of was thinking, well, if we got this many backers for Kor-Drath the Reckoning, I would think we'd get at least a third for this, just because people would go, well, I'm a fan of Andy's art, you know. But that wasn't the case. And I can understand it, because I buy books because of the art. Hell, most of the comics I buy are because of the art. And I've seen artists change styles on projects. And honestly, if I look at it and I'm like, not really a big fan of the change up they're doing or the experimentation, I won't buy it. So that could be, I don't know. So we'll have to see. I mean, I definitely enjoy doing that. It's fun. It came out cool. But I'm a business guy too, and I don't like not making money from effort.
So to date, what is your most successful campaign? What has been
Well,
your most successful campaign?
It's the Reckoning right now. Yeah.
Reckoning or Awakening? Oh, yeah, Awakening hasn't closed out yet.
Yeah, the Awakening's not done yet. So, yeah. So it's the Reckoning now. Yeah.
Yep. In future projects, do you think you'll do any where you write the story, or are you more?
I mean, I wrote, so Ultra. I wrote. Granted, Ultra was only in the Jungle Lords. Ultra was a short story. It was only 13 pages. Jungle Lords was the bulk of it, which was like 20 something pages. And I worked with another friend of mine on that. So I don't know. I mean, I'll get like the seed of like an idea, a nugget of like an idea, but then I've got to talk to somebody. And then once I talk to somebody about it, other ideas will flow. So I could possibly do it. But then I feel like if, even if I call up just not Dennis or, nobody I've worked with before, but just another friend of mine, right? And I call him up and I'm like, yeah, I just got this idea. And then, like, if say an hour or two goes by, we're on the phone. And because of the back and forth we had, I've got this really rounded out thing that I want to type up, or maybe I was taking notes during it. I don't feel like I wrote it by myself. And I feel like that person should get credit. Mm-hmm. So, I like collaborating. Yeah. I did a comic strip. I don't know if it's on my site or not, called Flex and Tone. I think it is. But because I always wanted to do a 3-panel, 4-panel comic strip in a newspaper. So I did a comic strip called Flex and Tone. Once again, you play to your strengths. So it's about this big, not dumb, but goofy bodybuilding guy. And he's Flex, and then Tone is the attractive, fitness workout woman. She's not a bodybuilder, but she's, she works out and stuff. And then he has a bulldog who his name is escaping me now, but he walks on his hind legs, and he has thought balloons like Garfield does and stuff. And I wrote a bunch of those strips, but then once again, I met somebody through the National Cartoonist Society some years ago, and we were talking about it, and he had some ideas for some strips. So he wrote some strips and I drew them, So there was that. Will at First Man or Demigod crossover. I mean, it's possible, but demigod is part of the ominous universe, and it really comes down to if that's something Bart would want, as in, the whole Ghostbusters crossing the streams, because First Man's not technically in the ominous universe, demigod is, and there really is a lot of depth to what Bart has for the ominous universe. Unfortunately, it was cut short with only doing the demigod miniseries, and then there was the Dread Gods miniseries that Tom Rainey drew, but there's all these threads that weave between them. So, I mean, I think it could be fun, but I don't know if it's something Bart would ever want to entertain. So,
Thanks for the question. Now, I didn't see Flex and Tone on your website. I was looking under the independent.
Yeah, that's where it would be.
I did
Well, that
see
just leaves me a note to put Flex and Tone on my website.
Watch
I don't
Guard.
have them all colored. Like, the nice thing when I was working with my buddy that was writing some of the gags is he colored, because the strips are just flat color. I only did them in black and white because, newspapers are mostly black and white. But and we did try submitting it to syndicates, and submitting a comic strip to a syndicate 30 years ago was one of the most difficult things you could do. Doing it now is so hard it's not even funny, because newspapers are dying and whatnot. But I'd say a third of the strips are in color. I'd like to get the rest colored, just because I've got 42 of them. And once again, it's something else. I could actually crowdfund a book with those 42 strips, but I just, I don't know if it would do well or not with, what it is. So
I did see on your website for independent projects, you did a cover for Dean Koontz and Nevermore.
Well, that was actually a mini series that Dynamite was putting out back in 2000. I want to say 10, maybe 2009. And Dean Koontz was obviously he was the idea guy behind it. And a friend of mine, Keith Champagne, wrote it. He collaborated with Dean on the story, basically taking Dean's, I don't think it was ever a novel that he wrote. I'm not sure. But point is, Keith adapted it either way. And it was going to be a 4 to 5 issue miniseries. Oh, it was coming out through the Dable brothers. And I think they had a deal with Dynamite to publish it, something like that. I drew 3 to 4 covers. 2 issues came out. I don't know if I drew 3 and it never came out or not, but 2 to 3 issues did come out. And it was it was kind of a sci-fi type thing, no superheroes or anything. I mean, that's the main cast right there. It was fun. It was fun drawing something it's technically not really everything's in my wheelhouse, because when you draw comics, you got to be able to draw everything.
Yep.
But there were no big, bulky, superheroes in it. So
Not like these guys.
Right. WatchGuard is something, as you see, it's Zion Studios. Charlie McElvey was the writer. He's a guy I've known for almost 30 years. Could be 30 years now. He's always wanted to create comics, so he started his own line. WatchGuard was something from 2012. I started it in 2011. He crowdfunded it on Kickstarter. It was supposed to be, I think it was supposed to be a 48-page book. My story was 24 pages with those guys. And then there was another story that was 24 pages drawn by a different artist. And he crowdfunded it. And, I kept it, obviously was successful. I kept working on my stuff. And the other guy just totally, screwed Charlie over, never finished it. He had trouble getting a hold of the guy. So to not really piss the backers off, Charlie fulfilled the campaign with just, a single issue 32-page comic, which was, my book or my portion of it, because the stories didn't tie in together or anything. So it was fun. I had a good time doing it. I got to design some of those characters as well. I can't remember which ones I designed and which ones he did, but it was fun. So that bottom image,
Well, let me get back to that.
yeah. Oh, it totally sucks for Charlie. It is. I'm not gonna, in my younger years, I'd mention the name of the guy and throw him under the bus, but I'm not going to do that. I think it was only supposed to be 4 issues, and that's the cover to the 4th issue. I was so sad. I think 1 and 2 came out. I think I started issue 3 and never finished it. I did all 4 covers, and that's one of my favorite covers. And I was so sad that it didn't come out because, I got to design those insectoid looking creatures and stuff. Cool. And I was just like, damn it. So, but yeah, so the guy never finished it. I'll say this. It's somebody, once again, you could probably go to Kickstarter, search it, find it. You find the guy's name. I like the guy's art. I was looking forward to seeing his part of the story because I did see pages from it. Mm-hmm. He has done an Indiegogo that successfully funded, I believe, 2 years ago now. It is, 2 years and change late, or maybe 3 years late. I'd have to go back and look from when I backed it. I backed it because, like I said, I like the guy's art. I like the concept of his project on Indiegogo. I thought, well, it's his project. Of course, this is going to come out. Well, got an update probably 2 weeks ago saying it's getting there. And, hey, it is what it is. You back projects, hoping for the best. I have faith.
Now, you mentioned it earlier when when you're doing inking, you don't think as much, so you like to, if like telemarketers call, you'll talk to them on the phone.
Yeah, I can be distracted easier. When I'm inking, I haven't done it lately, but when I'm inking, I can talk on the phone. I can even have a video on of generally something I've watched before, so I don't have to look up at it. Mm-hmm. But I know when the key points are to look up. So, if it's like, oh, I want to watch Avengers again, the movie, I could turn that on because I would look up at the cool stuff. But when I'm penciling, it's got to be pretty much full focus. And I mean, I can listen to a podcast because I need some type of noise. Mm-hmm. And it's not a conversation. That's why when I'm penciling, I don't talk on the phone, mm-hmm. because that includes me having to, think about the conversation. When I'm just listening to something, I can absorb the information, but I don't have to react, and converse back to it.
And then you mentioned drawing for yourself too. Do you mind showing any of your little sketches that you do?
I mean, the easiest way is I do what I came up with maybe a year ago or more. I don't even know. I found a sketch pad at Heroes Con, which is the local con I go to every year in Charlotte, and an art store called Cheap Joe's, which is a great art store. There's they have a store in town, but they set up at Heroes Con, and they had a pad of like 50 sheets, and it's 5.5 inches wide by 7 inches tall, or it might just be 5 by 7, one of the two. Anyhow, it's perfect size. I was like, oh my God, that is a great size. And I've never been a guy to draw in sketchbooks. I have some, and it's all unfinished stuff. But when I do a drawing, I like to complete it to inks. Mm-hmm. So with that paper, what I started out doing was just drawing, single characters just once a week for myself. It's like, oh, I like this character. I don't give nobody. Captain Canuck. Nobody cares about Captain Canuck. Well, I like Captain Canuck, so I'm gonna do a drawing of him. And I thought, well, why don't I do a time lapse video of
Mhm.
it? So I set my phone above my desk on a stand and I record a time lapse of my drawing it. And I just do that. And then I take it into a little video editing software because the time lapse might be over a few drawing sessions. Like I might pencil it, and that's like a half hour it takes me with, time lapse. It's like 2 minutes. And then 2 days later, I might ink it, whatever. So I edit it together in software. And every Thursday, I put it up on my website at 8 a.m. And, I always use the same graphic. So it's a branding thing. So if you go to YouTube, I put it up on YouTube, not my website. So if you go to YouTube, my YouTube channel, I have a playlist called Time Lapse Drawing Videos, and you can just see them all there. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I've got tons of them because I take them to cons to sell, or if somebody wants it, they can always email me and be like, "Oh, I want to buy that one."
Mhm.
But I'm drawing characters that I like that might not sell. So, like I did the leader of the Silverhawks, not exactly super popular except for an '80s kid, I guess. So now I'm trying to draw characters that, if I take them to a convention, people might be like, "Oh shit, that's cool." So like I did all the Thundercats, on separate sheets. And I was hoping I could sell the whole set, but somebody bought Lion-O, so now I don't have the set anymore.
My favorite character.
Yeah, Man-Thing. So like Man-Thing, I might have to do a drawing of, because I do. I got to draw Man-Thing once for Marvel early in
Oh
my
yeah.
career. Yep, Quasar 50 has Man-Thing in it, right on the splash page. So yeah, Man-Thing's cool. But as of late, because the other tendency I had, and I've had this when I was a kid, I would always just draw superheroes, guys,
Mhm.
because that's why I like to draw. But then I'm like, well, let's be honest, female characters sell. So I don't even know how many weeks it's been since I started, but it's been over 12. I know that. I was just like, that's it. I'm going to start drawing a female superhero character every week. And the only reason I changed recently is because I did Sue Storm, Invisible Woman. And I was like, well, now I got to do the rest of the team. So for 3 weeks, I did, I went and I did the Thing, Mr. Fantastic. And then tomorrow, the Human Torch drops. And then all four of them. And now I'm back to drawing women. But I'm not going to say who it is. But I did it again to myself in a way where if I do the main cast, I'll say there are other women in the cast,
X-Men.
but there's a couple main characters that are men as well. So I kind of did it to myself again. But at least for the next couple weeks after this one I finish, which will drop next week, I can draw a couple more women before I get to the men. So
I'm just gonna guess X-Men.
nope.
Oh.
I already did them, by the way, but that was a while ago. Like that's when I very first started doing these a while ago. Nope, it's not. So
But another team book. Any hits on publisher?
we'll see that. Well, no, because I can tell you this. It's been published by different companies. Actually, I can tell you this. Marvel's published it. DC's published it. Who else has? Dark Horse has too.
I'd have to research it. I'm not
Yeah. Or wait
deep
till
into
next
the.
Thursday, and when you see the video, you'll go, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
Because once you see the first drawing, you're like, "Oh, it's that. It's that." Okay. So
Yeah.
so
One
there
thing
you
is,
go.
I'm like more recently looking into like the Western comics because back in high school I was more into like the mangas and stuff like that.
Yeah. No,
But
that's
still
cool.
comics.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's another thing I want to do. Like, for a while there, I was doing, different characters from Friends. I did, and I still have it. I did a Godlike. Well, I've done two of him. John actually has one of them, and I did another one. some months later. I've done Cyber Frog and Heather. I've done Ghost of Matakumba Key, the two main characters. King Cryptid, I did. I've done a bunch of those. I haven't done. What's that?
Wraith of God?
No, I was about to say I have not done Wraith of God yet. I need to.
Or Garbage Man.
Esther wears so many clothes. I'm just not really appealed. No, I would draw her with her clothes in tatters, but then Aaron would never use the drawing. So, but I need to do Wraith of God. I did do, oh my God, Kit Carter. I did Kit Carter, which he was nice enough to publish in the back of his book. So I did Kit Carter. I did Black and White, the Black and White I did, like probably 3 years ago now. And Art said he'd ink it. So I never even inked it. So I sent him the original, and it's on that small paper, and he has yet to ink it. And now they're in new costumes. And I'm like, well, now I want to draw them in their new costume, but I'll ink it because who knows when Art will. So, yeah.
And I never did ask you, what was your first Comic-Con that you went to?
Oh, it was
first con, I should say.
Well, that depends. As a fan or as a professional?
As a fan and then a professional.
Was a fan. I grew up in Maryland, and there was a convention in Towson, which is a city right above Baltimore, and my dad would take me up there. And then as a professional, in 1991, the year I graduated the Kubert School, I was either finished drawing that first book for DC or I wasn't finished yet. But because there wasn't like a tight deadline because it was an inventory job, I cleared it with the editor. I went to Chicago Con in 1991 when it was still, I don't even think there was a Wizard magazine yet. So it was still Chicago Comic-Con. And that was as a professional. So I wasn't set up as a guest, but, I was a professional when I went. So the first one as a guest was Orlando Comic-Con in 1991. And it was what we call a hotel show. It was a one-day show in a hotel, which I love because it's all just comic dealers with a few artists and stuff. So.
And so was your dad always supportive of your career path, or?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Both my parents were. I had in the spare room in the house I grew up in, we didn't have an official guest room in the house, and my dad didn't need it as an office. So I had a wooden drawing table, just like the wooden drawing table Jack Kirby used. And it was set up in that room, and it was for me. And, at first when friends would come over, they'd be like, you don't have this whole room. This must be your dad's or something, because they couldn't imagine having a room to your, I was 15, having a room in my house that my parents set aside like that for me. So, oh yeah, they were always supportive. They would get stuff when it came out and all that. Well, too bad, Marcus. Aaron likes me better. You should know that by now.
And me, I got mine.
That's right. Well, soft cover or hardcover?
Soft cover.
Oh, see, I got the hardcover today. So nice. I had to wait a little bit longer, but.
Yeah, because the printer stabbed it to
death.
But
I can throw Aaron. I haven't even texted Aaron yet. I was going to as soon as I got home, but I got home late and, we started this up. But yep. I'll throw him under the bus now. Aaron, you forgot to include my Green Lantern drawing you did. Thanks. So now you have to pay extra postage to mail that to me. Mm-hmm. We traded. He's giving me the Green Lantern he did on Graybeards because I gave him the Kit Carter. So.
Yeah, we're kind of running over Graybeards right now, but.
That's okay.
But, yeah, so you had your own studio pretty much when you were 15. Were you an only child, or did you have siblings?
No, I had a brother. Or I have a brother. but he's not. He doesn't do anything like this. He didn't. I'm sure if he did anything where it was like, oh, he needs a workspace, they would have figured something out. I mean, he was mechanically inclined and worked on cars and stuff. I mean, I did too, but not to the extent he did. So I mean, he kind of had the basement for tools and stuff like that. So Marcus, what character is Aaron drawing though? That is the question. So, but yeah, so no, he kind of had his own thing going on. So
Yeah. And was your dad big into comics because he took you to the Comic-Con, or was that because you asked to go?
no, not in the least. In fact, I for his birthday one year, and this isn't nearly as sad as the Dennis. I wish Dennis was here because he has a version of this story, but it's so much sadder than mine. Mine's not that sad. My dad was really into Battlestar Galactica, the TV show, growing up. When I was growing up, and we'd watch it and stuff. And when I was at a con, and this is when I was a professional, early on, so 91, 92. When I was at a con, I came across Marvel's Battlestar Galactica in the back issues. So it wasn't expensive. I don't think they're expensive now. So I bought number one, and I either gave it to him for his birthday or Christmas. I don't remember which one. And he was appreciative, but at the same time, he was like, "Yeah, but I don't read comics." So it was like, okay. I mean, he kept it, but I can summarize Dennis's pathetic story real quick, and he'd call it that, so I don't mind calling it that. I'm sure Marcus has heard it. Dennis's dad, his dad, both our dads have passed away. His dad was Aaron's drawing the Goon, took the easy way out, barbed wire. Tell Aaron in the chat I respect David and Dan a lot more. So the Goon, like, that's difficult to draw, Aaron. So
see, I was going to draw Abe Sapien from Dark and Terrible.
There you go. So Dennis's dad grew up watching, or I guess he had a TV show. He must have. I don't know the name of the show. I don't think it was the Gene Autry show, but Gene Autry was a Western type dude. I mean, I don't even know much about him. I think he sang and stuff too, but whatever. So his dad really liked Gene Autry, is the point. And back in the 50s, Dell, it was either Dell or Gold Key, put out Gene Autry comics, and they put out a run. I don't think. Oh, that's true. Dan did draw the barbed wire comic. I don't think Aaron bought like the whole run of Gene Autry comics for his dad for his birthday, but he bought at least 10 or 15 of them in consecutive order because he saw him at a show. I didn't know Dennis at this point. And, he gave him to his dad, and his dad unwrapped them, and he looks at him, and he pulls them out, and it's Gene Autry comics. And I think his dad said something along the lines of, what the fuck are these? And Dennis is like, what are you talking about? They're Gene Autry comics. You love Gene Autry. He goes, yeah, I'm not going to read his damn comics though. And his mom, and I do remember this, his mom goes, Turner, that's Dennis's last name. And I guess when she was mad, she would call her husband by the last name, goes, Turner, be nice. He got those for you for your birthday. Show some appreciation. And he's like, what? I'm not going to read these. Dennis has them. So whenever we're at a con and I find Gene Autry comics, when both of us are at the same dealer looking through back issues, I'll be like, dude, I found something you got to get. And he'll walk over and I'll pull it up and he'll be like, you're such a dick. And I'm like, yes, I am.
That's funny.
So, but he still has them. So if anybody wants to run a Gene Autry comics, hit Dennis up. He'll sell them to you. No sentimental value there. And I'm not kidding. So.
I don't really have any other questions right now, so I think I'll let you go so you can enjoy the rest of your evening.
That's good time. My my wife texted once saying I'm on my way home. So I was like,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
So
Well,
she's
you're always welcome back if you want to come and stream and hang out, or if you just
yeah,
want to chat. It's
yeah,
nice
sounds
talking to
good.
you. Take care.
You too. Everybody go back Kor-Drath, subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet. And we'll catch you guys later. Thank you so much. Really
Wait,
appreciate it.
one last.
That's right. Dennis starts to cry.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.